Alrighty, in this video I figured I'd go ahead and show roughly my method on how I set up material IDs and all that kind of stuff to export out to other programs. Because if you're like me and you don't really have the funds to purchase Substance Painter or any sort of like subscription-based texturing software that can make out material IDs and all that kind of stuff for you, like for example, I have Marmoset Toolbag. That's mostly where I do my texturing, baking, and I also will use Quixel Mixer fairly often, and I also have Armor Paint. But none of these really, in my opinion, bake out high polys, or sorry, not high polys, material IDs super simply. So as I'm going through and exporting out material IDs, I figured I'd go ahead and take you along. So let me go ahead and clear this on out and move on to the next part. Ready? So at the scope mount. So essentially I'm just finishing up the exporting of the Remington that I went ahead and made. So I have the scope mount, and I think I'll go ahead and do the actual scope first. That'll be a simpler way to view it. So basically here, I'm in the UV editing tab. I do want to go ahead and add a triangulate modifier to this just for exporting, as well as I'm going to go ahead and just do the normal default unwrapping. I'm going to come over here, I'm going to make a new image, and I'm going to index it with color ID underscore scope. And I'm doing all my parts separate for my FPS plugin system, so that's the reason for it. And now we want to go ahead and set it up to bake. So currently everything's laid out appropriately. It's decent enough. It's making pretty good use of everything. The only thing I'm not happy with is because this is a different material here. I'm going to actually have two materials. I want to have these fill up the center. So I'm going to select one face. Whoops. I'm going to go ahead and unwrap it, and it'll go through and fill it. Same thing over here. Unwrap it, it'll go ahead and fill it. And actually, it just occurred to me, I'm not going to have any material IDs with this one, so that one's actually good to go. Let me move that down. Sorry about that. We'll just do this guy, because this will have material IDs. So we're going to name the image color ID underscore scope mount. And we have, obviously, the mount itself, and then the bolts. So let's go down to our shaders tab. And here we have the materials for it. So I want to simplify this up a bit. One, I have 3 different materials, but I want to simplify let me rephrase it, not simplify, but make the baking faster. So I go into surface, I select diffuse instead, and I'm going to do that for all of these. I have yet to do that. I've just been doing it one by one, and set the colors. So if all possible, I try to set them as solid as red, green, or blue, because that allows me, if I really wanted to, I could change these out, the colors out inside of Unreal Engine directly without having to go through and rebake. All right, so there's my colors all set. Let's go over here to the shading tab. What we're going to do is select each one of these. We're going to Shift A, search for image texture, and then we select our image for that part. So in this case, we're doing the scope mount, so we're going to select the scope mount image, copy that node, paste it. No need to connect it to anything. Come back here to UV editing tab so I can see it a little bit easier. We're going to go to the baking. Make sure you're set to using the Cycles render engine. Go down to your baking drop-down menu. Under bake type, we select diffuse. We want to uncheck direct and indirect, so just color selected. And for the margin, I'm doing 1 pixel. And just to be safe, clear the image and hit bake. Alrighty, that took about 40 seconds and it made a mess because I realized that I forgot to actually go through and unwrap it. I also want to make sure I add the triangulate modifier for my sake of exporting. So I'm just going to go ahead and unwrap this and hit bake one more time. Alrighty, we have it baked out. As you can see, everything's laid out appropriately. Didn't do the greatest job at laying it out. There is a good bit of empty space here, but I'm not too worried about it since this isn't really for personal use. It's just for the sake of adding content to the plugin so people can tinker around with it. All right, once we have that, let's go ahead and save out that image wherever you want. And then how do we use this? So what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate that mesh. I'm going to drag mine out here. and find it. Then we want to go ahead and delete the extra materials. So we only want to have one material, and I'm just going to leave it as scope mount. And we are pretty much good to go. So we can go ahead and export this on out. With the Remington 700, this can be actually a 30 millimeter scope mount because I want it to be kind of universal. And I'm going to export it out. All right, and to test it, I'm just going to bring it over into Marmoset. Set up a new texture project, link up the material, select my color ID, and drag on some materials to make sure everything looks okay. So that looks good enough. I don't see any real glaring issues where it has crossover or anything like that. And there we go. So we have our color ID set up and good to go. Alrighty. So that's really all there is to baking out color ID maps. You can do this for obviously other things if you're baking high poly to low poly, but if you're going to do that kind of stuff and you already have something like, for example, Marmoset, then it's really a good idea to go ahead and actually do the baking inside of Marmoset, because honestly, it's a vastly superior baker. You can also do high poly to low poly to material IDs through Marmoset as well. Essentially, you would kind of do the same thing where you have separate materials, all with different colors, and you would label it as a low and high poly. So you would bring it into here to the baker. You would load it in as a low high poly. Then you would go through, you would select material ID, bake it out, and you would get your material ID that way. I've had some issues with it here and there. I don't know if I'm doing it wrong or what, but anyways, that's just another route. Alrighty, so that's going to be all for this video. I figured I'd just kind of show you something. And if you like what I'm doing and you want to help support me, you can find a link to my Patreon down in the description below, where I have a Team Deathmatch series just for Patrons, as well as you get early access to pretty much all of my videos. Alright, I'll see you in the next video.